Chapter 1: The House on the Hill. The Whitmore house sat on a Dallas rise where the wind liked to pause and catch its breath. It was all glass and limestone and angles that looked expensive even when you didn't know why, windows tall enough to slice the sky into glossy panes, floors that reflected faces back at you like polite water. At night the place glowed as if the city below were a toy train set and the hilltop a station master's office. In the morning, it behaved. Richard Whitmore believed in rooms that behaved. He had made his money convincing restless land to line up into neighborhoods, persuading steel and glass to stack into sleek signatures on the skyline. His suits hung in rows, navy to charcoal like a storm rolling in and out. His calendar clicked in 15-minute squares. When he walked through a room, people flattened wrinkles with their hands without knowing they'd done it. One room refused to fall in line. At the back of the house, a small sunroom held light like a secret, and on its soft rug you could trace the half-moon impressions of a wheelchair. 6-year-old Henry left them like pale footprints every day. No one vacuumed them out. Even the house manager, who ironed throw blankets, pretended not to see. Henry had been born with legs that didn't listen. They felt heavy to him, as if someone had replaced his bones with sleepy rain. Specialists had their words, hypertonia, spasticity, motor planning, and their plans, laminated and stapled, with charts to fill and stickers to earn. They also had their shrug, tucked at the end of every meeting. Maybe someday, they said, like weather.
Maybe someday, echoed through the house with the chime of the door sensors and the sigh of the air vents. It lived in the way Caroline Whitmore measured out Henry's morning meds in a dish shaped like a seashell, in how she checked the therapy schedule taped to the fridge with blue painter's tape, in how she watched her son's body the way a sailor watches clouds. She wasn't brittle, she was careful. She built soft around him, rounded corners, rugs that didn't slip, a basket of socks thicker than slippers. When she laughed, she did, often. It sounded like a secret she still believed in. Henry was a quiet scientist of his own world. From the sunroom he could see downtown, the cranes that drew new buildings with patient gestures. He named them, Tall One, Red Hook, Sleepy. He kept a baseball on the window ledge and rolled it with his palm, tracing its seams. Sometimes the kitchen radio drifted in, old soul songs from the station the cook liked, and he drummed his fingers on his chair arms. He could do rhythms his legs couldn't. He collected the house's beats, the double tap of the dishwasher door, the hum of the fridge waking up, the tick that wasn't a clock but the way the AC clicked on, a tiny metronome that lived in the vents. On the kitchen floor, cream tiles framed by a darker border made a quiet checkerboard. From the chair, that border looked like a path. He could see it even when he closed his eyes, a square, a square, a square, steps he could name if not take. Richard didn't like the word can't. He had met it 100 times and taught it manners. But with Henry, can't had moved in and would not be charmed. Richard took calls in the home office with the glass wall, speaking softly when deals were delicate and loudly when they weren't. He read papers about new techniques, printed in journals with titles that took up whole lines. He wrote checks as if the ink might anchor the future. In the NICU, 6 years earlier, he had stood beside a plastic bassinet under blue light, his tie crooked, and promised the small person inside that money would be a bridge. Bridges, he'd learned, don't move mountains. They wait for them to erode. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, therapists arrived with tote bags and kind voices. They placed Henry on mats and asked his muscles to wake. He laughed with them because they made animal sounds and played games with beanbags and plastic cones. They celebrated inches. Still, by dinner the word plateau sat in the room like an extra chair. Maybe we try aquatic therapy next, a woman named Jenna suggested one afternoon, her voice friendly with hope that wasn't sure of itself. Of course, Richard said. Book the pool. Whatever he needs. He looked at Henry the way a man looks through glass, seeing and not touching. In the evenings, Caroline sometimes stood at the stove and swayed to whatever the radio offered while the sauce simmered. Not dancing, not really. Just a body remembering. When Henry noticed, she smiled and made her motions smaller, as if her joy might startle something delicate. The staff moved through the house with professional invisibility. Mrs. Ellery, the house manager, had a way of appearing right before you needed a tissue. The cook, Arturo, believed butter was a language. A gardener came on Thursdays and left the azaleas tidy enough to pass inspection. They all liked Henry. They told him things they didn't tell each other. Arturo confessed he was practicing English idioms and tried them out badly. "Piece of cake," he said, burning the toast, and Henry laughed so hard he hiccuped. None of them had a plan, not beyond keeping the place from falling apart and the child from bruising. An email thread among the adults carried the subject line, "Support for H.W." and attached a PDF labeled protocol_v7.pdf. Inside were exercises and goals and a column titled Notes. The notes column was crowded with kind words and tiny sighs. Once, when the house was full of the smell of lemon cleaner and new flowers, Henry decided to attempt something without asking. He set his palms on the low coffee table in the sunroom and leaned forward until his arms lifted more weight than his legs. The table edge bit his skin, he didn't mind. He pushed, found an inch of lift, and felt every muscle in his body shout at once. He held for one heartbeat, maybe two, then tipped and skidded to the rug. The sound was small. He lay there facing the table leg, which had a scratch shaped like a lightning bolt. He stayed until his breath stopped sounding like trouble. Then he scooted back into his chair alone. He would have liked to tell someone. He would also have liked to keep the try for himself. Caroline found the faint red crescent on his forearm at bath time. "Did you bump?" she asked gently. "Probably," he said, which was true. She pressed a washcloth to the mark and said nothing else. Love sometimes knows when words are heavier than silence. That night, after Henry slept, Richard opened his laptop at the kitchen island and searched for clinics 3 states away. He read testimonials and outcomes and watched a video of a boy stepping with robotic braces, a chorus of praise in the background. He imagined importing the machine, the team, the victory. The fridge hummed like it did every night. He didn't hear it. On the fridge, a sheet of paper under a magnet shaped like a grapefruit slice listed the week in squares: speech therapy, OT, PT, tutor, pulmonology. At the bottom, in Mrs. Ellery's neat print, someone had added, "New hire starts Monday." Caroline had signed off on it hours before, tapping the email in bed while the house dimmed around her. "Do we need another person?" Richard had asked, not unkindly, just tired. "We need more hands," she'd said. "And maybe different eyes." He'd nodded and turned off his phone, missing the last line of the job posting that had caught Caroline's attention: experience with children a plus. Patience required. Rhythm welcome. Monday was 3 days away. The hill kept its view. The sunroom kept its half-moons. Somewhere above the city, a crane swung slow, drawing a line only it could see. And in the hush between the dishwasher click and the vent's tiny tick, the house held its breath, as if listening for something it couldn't name yet. Chapter 2, Ms. Lila Brooks Arrives. Monday came in bright and bossy, the kind of Dallas morning that made the limestone flash like teeth. A black sedan eased up the driveway at 8:30 on the dot, and out stepped a woman in a neat navy dress and church shoes that had been polished more by years than by wax. She carried a canvas tote with a zipper that worked, a lunch wrapped in foil, and a small spiral notebook with the corners softened by other houses, other lives. "Ms. Brooks," said Mrs. Ellery in her perfect receptionist voice, as if the house itself were answering the door. Welcome to the Whitmore residence. I'll walk you through the routines. Thank you, Lila said. Her voice had the soft scrape of someone who'd worked mornings for decades. She glanced past the foyer's glitter and took in the scent of lemon cleaner and the faint line of wool tracks in the rug like the tail of a question. Orientation looked like a tour but was really a list of rules. No bleach on the Carrera. Wipe the fingerprints from the glass railing twice daily. Lunch for Henry is soft but not baby. Caroline takes tea at 2 if she remembers to stop. Richard prefers silence when he's on calls, which is most of the day. The house manager waited for oh my's or fancies, but Lila only nodded and tucked each instruction into her careful mind. What's most important, Mrs. Ellery said, pausing in the kitchen like a teacher about to announce homework, is discretion. The family appreciates invisibility. Lila smiled with only the right side of her mouth. I've been invisible and I've been seen, she said. Both are work. She set her toad on a chair and took out a folded photograph, slipped it back in. 3 grown kids looked out from that paper, one in scrubs, one in a baseball cap, one behind a drum kit. She had raised them in apartments with floors that creaked complaints and in duplexes where the neighbors' arguments sang through the vents. She knew the sound of a house before it spoke. Caroline came in wearing a sweater she'd probably forgotten was expensive. You must be Ms. Brooks, she said, and her relief came first, then her smile. I'm Caroline. Thank you for being here. Lila will do, she said, and took Caroline's hand the way she took all hands, like a promise and not a test. He's in the sunroom, Caroline said, voice dropping. He likes mornings there. Lila walked the hallway at an unhurried pace, noting the painter's tape on the fridge calendar, the basket of thick socks by the door, a toy car parked precisely beside a chair leg. The sunroom asked for quiet and got it. Henry sat in his chair, a baseball under one palm, watching downtown crane its necks. Good morning, Lila said, stopping where he could see her without looking up too far. I'm Lila. He turned, chin tilted like a little mayor. I'm Henry, he said. Do you like baseball? I like anyone who likes anything, she answered. That shows me there's a fire inside. He rubbed the ball seam with his thumb and considered her like a puzzle with only a few missing pieces. Do you know Al Green? He asked, testing the world with a child's favorite tool, a question. I know him enough to sing wrong and mean it, Lila said, and he smiled, just one corner, same as she had. From the kitchen radio, Arturo's station slid in low, let's stay together, wandering like a memory. Lila's right foot found the beat on the tile without asking. Not dancing, just a quiet timekeeper. Henry's fingers answered on his chair arms, tap tap, the rhythm they could obey. The first hour Lila didn't move much. She listened. Houses tell you what they need if you don't interrupt. The vents ticked like a small metronome. The dishwasher door made its double tap. Somewhere a timer beeped once, embarrassed. She saw the kitchen floor's cream squares bordered in darker tile, a path pretending not to be a path. She watched how Henry's shoulders rose when he laughed, as if the top half of him had already decided to lift. By 10, she had wiped the counters, set the towels to wash, and placed Caroline's teacup on the stove like a reminder made of porcelain. She asked permission before touching anything that looked like a habit. Mind if I move this basket closer to the door, she asked, and when Caroline nodded, she slid the socks where a reaching hand wouldn't have to reach so far. In the pantry, Caroline showed her the shelf of medical things, plastic syringes for liquid meds, a tray of inhalers, a row of little brown pill bottles that rattled like pocket change. We've been through a lot, Caroline said, and the pause between words told the unprinted story. I can see, Lila said gently. Hope's a muscle. It gets sore. But it's worth the work. Caroline's mouth trembled and then steadied. I want him to have, not just care. Joy. Joy visits kitchens, Lila said. She likes the smell. Arturo appeared with a dish towel slung over his shoulder. Buenos dias, Ms. Lila, he said, tasting her name like a new spice. We are a team here. Sometimes we lose, but we're very polite about it. Pleasure, Mr. Arturo, she said, and when he tried an idiom, piece of cake, while dropping a spatula, she laughed with him, making the mistake into a handshake. At 11, the therapist arrived with a bag of colored bands and a roll-up mat. Lila didn't hover. She learned. She watched where hands supported and where words lifted. She listened to the therapist's praise, real and thin by turns. She noted the way Henry focused until he didn't, the exact minute his body said no with a whisper before the shout. Richard came through once, phone to his ear, eyebrows in a line. He nodded at Lila without really seeing her. Yes, I understand, he said into the call. Deliverables by Friday. When the door whisked shut behind him, the air forgot to be important and returned to ordinary. At lunch, Lila set Henry's plate so he could reach it without a stretch and sat across, not hovering, just there. If you were a crane, she asked, stealing a glance at the skyline he loved, what would you build first? A ramp from my room to the kitchen, he said, not missing the beat. And a baseball field on the roof. Dream big or you'll run out of road, she said, and he nodded like she'd told him a secret he already knew. After dishes, while the house exhaled its midday sigh, Lila took her spiral notebook to the back steps and wrote in her compact hand, Henry, bright, rhythm strong, fingers quick, legs hesitant but curious. Tile path in kitchen. Radio's help. Meet him where the beat lives. She underlined the last sentence twice and circled it, not for drama but for direction. Before she left that first day, she found Caroline in the hallway, the afternoon light laying lace on the floor. Do you mind, Lila asked, if I bring a little metronome tomorrow? Not for therapy. For the kitchen. A metronome? Caroline repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar word that might be sweet. Just a tick to keep the day honest, Lila said. He already hears it. We might as well let it be heard. Caroline breathed out something that wasn't a laugh but wasn't tears either. Yes, she said. Yes, bring it. On her way down the drive, Lila looked back at the glass house with its views of everything but itself. She had learned this, some homes want you to be a ghost. Some need you to be a bell. She touched the small cross at her collarbone and thought of her children spread like bright pins on a map, of kitchens she had rescued from chaos and sorrow she had learned not to tidy too fast. Tomorrow she would bring the metronome. Not a plan, exactly. A pulse. The kind you can build around. Chapter 3, Kitchen Practice Begins. Lila arrived the next morning with two things that didn't look like much, a brown paper sack that clinked softly and a wooden metronome the size of a mango. She set the sack on the counter, placed the metronome at the corner where sunlight pooled, and flicked its pendulum. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was small but bossy, like a teacher clapping once for quiet. Is that a clock? Henry asked from the doorway, rolling in with the careful speed of someone who knows how floors behave. It's a promise, Lila said. It keeps time so we can use it for work, or play if we're lucky. Arturo looked up from his skillet. If it keeps me from overcooking the onions, I will marry it, he said, solemn, then grinned. Lila turned the metronome until Henry could see the chrome arm wag. You hear that? That's walking music, even if we don't walk yet. We're going to teach your body to like rhythm everywhere, not just in your fingers. Henry drummed a polite paradiddle on his chair arms. My fingers are ready. Good, Lila said. Call and response. I'll talk, you answer. She tapped, ta-ta-ta, rest, ta-ta. He answered, a perfect echo, chin tipped down, eyes bright. Lila shifted the pattern, long, short, 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 long, a little swing for Al Green. Henry followed, laughing when he missed by a hair, correcting himself on the next bar without being told. Caroline hovered near the fridge, the worry and want in her face like two people trying to share a chair. Lila felt the gaze and didn't look up. Hope grows best when no one stares it into being. From the paper sack, she took out a tennis ball and two heavy sheet pans that had lived long lives in someone else's oven. She tested each pan with the heel of her hand, listening for wobble on the tile. No weight games, she said, glancing at Caroline. Just glide. Feet are sleepy kids, we'll sing them awake. She placed the pans on the cream squares of the floor like stepping stones across a very small river. Shoes off, she told Henry gently. Socks on. He towed his sneakers loose and let Lila tug them free. His feet were pale and serious, toes curled like they'd been concentrating for years. Sit tall, Lila said, rolling his chair close so his heels hovered over the first pan. We're not standing. We're listening with your feet. When I say go, toes reach like they're waving to the other shore, then slide back home. No rush. We move on the tick. He nodded, breath held the way kids hold it when they try a cannonball. On the next tick, his left foot stretched forward, skimmed the cool metal, then slid back. It was not pretty. It was honest. The right followed, slower, determined. Left, right. The metronome insisted. His ankles whispered their complaints, his shins hummed in a voice they hadn't used. That's it, Lila coached, soft as steam. Don't chase the beat. Invite it. After 8 counts she paused him, then set the tennis ball on the table. Now your hands get jealous if we leave them out. Posture tall. Reach out, send the ball to me on the tick, I'll roll it back on the talk. Tick, roll. Talk, receive. To make the catch, Henry had to lean from his belly, find the small muscles that turned a reach into a controlled trip and a return. Arturo, charmed, turned the stove to low and started cracking eggs in the rhythm. I am a drummer now, he announced, missing a shell. Oops. Still a cook. They cycled, feet glide, hands roll, fingers clap the pattern. Lila kept the work contained to something that looked like play. She praised specifics, not effort in general. You caught that with your middle back, not your shoulders. That's expensive muscle. Or, your right foot was shy, you convinced it. In the doorway, Mrs. Ellery appeared, eyeing the pans like trespassers. Will those scratch the tile? She asked, polite as a warning sign. Not if we mind our manners, Lila said, laying dish towels under the pan edges with a quick neatness that soothed house managers and mothers and the part of Henry that liked order. We're borrowing the kitchen, not remodeling it. Caroline edged closer. He's okay? She asked, looking at Henry's face for micro-flinches. He's working, Lila said. Work can feel like a stretch and still be safe. Henry made a face because stretch and safe had rarely visited him together. Lila caught the look. 2 more glides, she said. Then we name the game. He finished the set, cheeks pink with the kind of effort that comes from somewhere old. Moon shoes, he announced, breathy. I was going to say ferry boats, Lila countered. Moon boats, he decided, pleased with himself, and tapped the pan with his toes like christening a ship. They took a water break and Lila turned the metronome faster, then slower, letting Henry feel how his body wanted to match without being told. "This little thing tells the truth," she said. "It keeps going whether we like it or not. We can fight it or friend it." "Friend it," Henry said, because he was 6 and already tired of fights he never picked. The second round, Lila put a coin on the far edge of the pan. "Goal is not speed," she said. "Goal is touch. Slide until your toe kisses the coin. No kicking. Just hello." He tried, overshot, reset, tried again, found it, smiled so wide his upper lip disappeared. "Put bases," he said suddenly, looking at Arturo. "Like first and second." Arturo handed over 2 cork coasters with restaurant logos half washed away. Lila laid them 2 tiles apart. "First is the ball to me. Second is a foot glide. Third is claps. Home is water." They played the inning twice, then 3 times. Henry learned that his body got smarter across repetitions, that boredom was often a door he could walk through if he stayed long enough. Richard crossed the threshold once, mid-call, and paused. Hands on the floor, coasters on the tile, his son bent like a small athlete at a workbench. He frowned, not at Henry but at the unpredictability of it all, the kitchen a gym, the clock a song. "Is this safe?" he mouthed to Caroline. "Yes," Caroline mouthed back, surprised that she already believed it. At a tiny wobble, Henry caught the table edge with his palm and scowled, pride stung. Lila leaned in. "Every boat rocks," she said. "You kept your cargo. That's a win." He reset his jaw and finished the sequence with cleaner lines than before. They ended with a ritual Lila invented on the spot. "3 good things, then we close the shop." She held up a finger for each as Henry named them. 1. I touched the coin without kicking. 2. I didn't drop the ball when you surprised me. 3. My foot went farther on the right. Lila added one of her own. 4. You laughed when it got hard. That's gold. She silenced the metronome, and the quiet felt full, not empty. Caroline exhaled a breath she didn't know she was holding and swiped a thumb under her eye. "What do you call all this?" she asked, gesturing at the pans and the coasters and the boy reorganizing himself one small rhythm at a time. Henry answered before Lila could. "Kitchen practice," he said, like naming a team. "Kitchen practice it is," Lila said, and wrote it in her spiral notebook with a tidy underline. Below it she added numbers a coach would understand and a mother would love: moon boats, 16 glides L/14R, coin kisses, 7 clean, ball returns, 22 of 25, laughs, 11, frustrations, 2, resolved. She drew a small box beside tomorrow's date and labeled it beat. Rituals like boxes give effort a place to live. As she packed the pans back into the sack, Lila tapped the counter once, a quiet amen. "Same time after breakfast tomorrow?" she asked Henry. "Same beat," he said, and saluted with 2 fingers, his own invention. The kitchen held the echo of the metronome as if it had liked the company. Somewhere in the house, a vent clicked on, right on time, and Henry's toes flexed as if they recognized an old friend. Chapter 4, Standing for 5. The next morning, Lila arrived with a long bundle wrapped in a dish towel and tied with baker's twine. She set it on the counter beside the metronome, tapped the pendulum to life, tick, 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 and unwrapped the bundle like a picnic. 2 slender canes lay inside, their wood honey smooth, the tops padded with folded terrycloth and taped neat. "New instruments," she said. Henry rolled closer, eyes bright. Are those swords? Only if we're fighting gravity, Lila said. I made them from an old broom handle. They're not for walking off to anywhere yet. They're for standing, right here, as if the floor belonged to us. Caroline's hand hovered near the back of Henry's chair. Is he ready? No one is ready, Lila said gently. We say hello and see if standing wants to stay a minute. She showed Henry how to grip the canes, thumbs forward, not white-knuckled, then positioned his chair at the kitchen table, brakes on, the seat cushion adjusted to its firmest. She slid a sturdy dining chair behind him like a promise. If you sit back, this will catch you, she said. If you tip forward, I'm your fence. Am I supposed to look brave? Henry asked, making a face that was half joke, half shield. No, Lila said. You're supposed to look at me. She knelt so her eyes met his. Up close, Henry's lashes were still baby-long, incongruent with the grit in his jaw. The metronome kept on, small and insistent. Arturo lowered the stove flame as if turning down the room's noise. We're going to practice the part before the standing, Lila said. It's called the lean. Hands press, belly long, head tall, and we lean like a tree that trusts the wind. She set her forearm like a guard across his waist. On the next tick, push down through your hands just enough to unstick your bottom from the chair. We're not leaving the ground. We're saying, we could. Tick. Henry pressed. His shoulders rose first, then wobbled. His bottom lifted the width of a coin and then settled back. You did that, Lila said, unblinking praise. Again. Tick. Press. Lift. Settle. 3 times. 4. The fourth earned him a small grin he tried to swallow. Standing is that feeling, longer, Lila said. We don't chase the sky. We borrow it. Caroline swallowed. What if he falls? Lila supplied. He will. All students do. That's why I'm here. And that chair. And that heartbeat. She nodded at the metronome. Tick. Tick. They rehearsed the lean until Henry's elbows learned to talk to his hips. Then Lila repositioned him an inch closer to the table, angled the canes so the rubber tips loved the tile. Now we try to stand. She kept her voice mild, like asking him to pass the salt. You'll push with your hands and your feet at the same time. Don't think up. Think long. We count to 5 if 5 feels generous. We stop if your face says stop. He set his jaw, and for a second he was not 6 but some older, future boy who had already run into hard things and decided to stay. On the next tick, he pressed. Arms trembled. Knees argued. The canes creaked the tiniest complaint. Lila's arm firmed at his waist, not lifting, only guarding. And then, there it was. A hush in his body where sitting had been. He rose 3 inches, maybe 4, calves shaking like strummed strings. His breath stalled, he found it again. 1, Lila said, calm as weather. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth. 2. A vein in Henry's temple pulsed. He stared at Lila as if her face were a horizon line. 3. The canes clattered a warning and he dropped, chair catching him square. The landing knocked a small sound out of him, half grunt, half laugh, and he flushed with a mix of pride and insult. 3 you didn't have yesterday, Lila said, gentle but precise. Tomorrow we'll steal 4. Henry scowled because scowling was easier than crying, then nodded because nodding was braver. Again, he said. They tried again. The second rise was stingier, 2 counts and a collapse. Lila didn't correct the number. That's honest, she said. Honest beats fancy. On the third try he found 3.5, the half a stubborn heartbeat that Lila counted anyway. For next time, she promised quietly, and he believed her in the way children believe tides. Arturo, who had been holding his spatula like a microphone, exhaled a wordless cheer. "Capitan," he said to Henry, "you are taller today." "Am I?" Henry asked, truly curious. Lila turned to the doorframe by the fridge where no marks yet lived, pulled a pencil from behind her ear, and drew a tiny dash at the height of Henry's head when seated. Beside it she wrote SIT. Then she walked him through one more stand, counted a clean 3, and marked a second dash, higher, a breath above the first. Stand, she wrote, and the kitchen became a growth chart for something no pediatrician measures. Again after water, Lila said, handing Henry a cup. He drank like a person who had just learned thirst is also a skill. Between sets, Lila coached micro-movements. "Send your knees forward as if they're curious," she said. "Let your heels be heavy friends." She tapped his sternum, a light drummer's touch. "This part tall. The rest will listen." Caroline watched from a chair, fingers laced so tight her knuckles paled. Once she started to speak, "Maybe we should," and then stopped because should had done enough damage. They made a game of the next round. "We'll name the seconds as if they're places," Lila proposed. 1 is porch. 2 is yard. 3 is gate. 4 will be street. 5 is pie. "Why pie?" Henry asked, breathless. "Because 5 deserves dessert," Lila said, and Arturo saluted with a whisk. They rose and visited porch and yard and almost brushed gate. Henry fell back and laughed, a small bark of surprise at his own body. "Gate's rude," he said. "Gates only open for people who knock twice," Lila said. Again. By the end of the hour, they had collected numbers like bright marbles, 3, 3, 2, 3.5. The last stand of the morning found a skinny 4 that quivered like a fawn. Lila didn't chase 5. She closed the metronome, and the room softened. "3 good things," she said. Henry panted, cheeks flushed, hair stuck to his forehead. 1, I reached gate once. He held up a finger with ceremony. 2, my knees didn't argue on the left. Much. Second finger. 3, I didn't cry, he said, and surprised himself by almost doing it then. Lila touched the padded top of one cane. 4, you asked for, again, more than I asked for, rest. That's a coach's dream. Caroline let out an audible breath, then crossed the floor and kissed the crown of Henry's head. You feel taller, she said. The sentence sounded silly and true. When Richard drifted through later, between calls, he paused at the doorframe and squinted at the 2 pencil lines. What's this? He asked, not unkindly, just arriving late to a language already being spoken. Measurements, Lila said. Of courage. Of standing, Henry added, and lifted a cane as if to toast. We got to gate. Richard's gaze moved from the marks to the canes to his son's bright, tired face. Something cautious shifted in him, but he only said, good, as if the word were breakable, and stepped back into his meeting. That afternoon, while Henry napped, Lila sat at the kitchen table and wrote in her spiral notebook, standing trials, 7, best hold, 4 counts, quivery. Notes, teach breath on rise, cue long, not up, name seconds for fun, chart marks help. She underlined tomorrow, steal 4 clean, flirt with 5. Before she left, she retied the dish towel around the canes and set them beside the metronome the way a band might rest their instruments between sets. The kitchen, always tidy, felt newly arranged, like a room had made space for a bigger story. The next day, they would knock again. And again. Until Gate knew their names and pie didn't feel like a joke. The metronome, patient and sure, ticked once in Lila's mind as she closed the door behind her, time enough to try, and try again. Chapter 5, Night of Thunder, Light of Candles. The sky went from sulking to furious in 10 minutes flat. By late afternoon the Dallas heat had stacked clouds like plates, and then, without warning, those plates shattered. Wind shouldered the oaks. Rain came in sheets that looked almost solid. The big panes of the Whitmore house wore the storm like a dare. Henry loved storms the way a scientist loves experiments. He watched from the sunroom as if the weather had arrived just to show off for him. Each thunder roll found his ribs and rattled them gently. That one was a 7, he said, because he rated everything. 8, Arturo countered from the kitchen, making a late pot of coffee he would never admit he needed. It moved my soul and the salt shaker. The lights hiccuped once, steadied, then dropped away as if someone had unplugged the sky. The house made an embarrassed sound, the security systems chirp, the fridge's little whine, and fell quiet. 2 beats later, the generator tried to clear its throat in the side yard, sputtered, and gave up. Well, Caroline said, hands on the counter, voice finding a brave tone that hadn't seen much use lately. We are camping. Lila crossed the room with the unhurried step of someone who knew where every drawer lived even in the dark. She set 3 stout candles on the island, struck a match, and made 3 small suns. The flames licked the brass rims and painted the kitchen the color of honey. The metronome, thank God, was wood and spring, not outlet and cord. She set it down, wound it with a thumb flick, and nudged the pendulum. Tick, tick, tick. You brought fire and time, Henry said. You're a wizard. I'm a maid with a bag and a memory, Lila said. And a rule, storms are a good time to practice being brave. Caroline glanced at the windows, at the black outside where the lawn had disappeared. In the dark. In the dark especially, Lila said. Fear hates company and rhythm. She laid a dish towel on the cool tile and placed Henry's canes on it, padded tops wrapped smooth and familiar. Kitchen practice, she asked, voice easy, as if suggesting a board game. Henry swallowed, eyes flicking from candle to cane to Lila's face. Kitchen practice, he agreed, and the way he said it made the room feel like a small church. Lila parked his chair tight to the table, set the brakes, and warmed his knees with her palms the way a trainer warms an athlete. We'll do what we always do, she said. Lean, breathe, stand. We'll count like tourists visiting places we've named. Caroline hovered, the storm's drum solo playing every old anxiety in her chest. If he falls, we catch him, Lila said, not looking away from Henry. If he stands, we celebrate. Either way, we learn. Thunder cracked so close it felt like a handshake. The candles fluttered and then steadied. Henry's mouth made a small O but didn't argue. Eyes, Lila said softly. He met hers. The metronome kept time to a larger weather, tiny and stubborn. Tick. Lean, she cued. He pressed down through the canes, his shoulders wanted to rise, but he corrected, drawing long through his spine like she'd taught him. Breathe. He did, loud enough to convince himself. Stand. He pushed. Knees forward, heels weighted, belly tall. The chair gave up his weight, slowly, like it wanted proof. He rose, 2 inches, then 3, then the little hush that meant standing had arrived. 1, Lila said, voice a steady rail. Porch, Henry whispered, because names helped. 2. Yard. 3. Gate, he said, and almost laughed because Gate had been rude all week. 4, Lila said, surprised by how calm she sounded given the electricity dancing through her own chest. Street, Henry said, wobbling once, catching himself with a microscopic adjustment he could not have made last month. 5, Lila finished, and his legs trembled like thin trees in wind. Pie, Henry breathed, and the word wobbled like the flame. Sit, Lila said before pride asked for a 6th and the body rebelled. He dropped into the chair, knees wide, canes clacking a tired thank you on the tile. For a half-second the room was silent and then laughter jumped out of both of them, relief wrapped in joy, the kind that leaves the throat warm. Caroline cried without noise, a practiced skill. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and let 2 tears fall like punctuation. From the dark doorway came a shape, backlit by the faintest lightning flash. Richard, phone a black rectangle in his hand, usefulness cancelled. He looked strange without the house's lights to dress him, smaller, or maybe just more human. His gaze took in the canes, the candlelight, the metronome, his son's flushed face. What is this? He asked. Not angry, not kind. Just a man finding a new room in his own home. Practice, Lila said. Practice for what? His voice softened on the last word as if it remembered something tender at the last second. For walking, Henry said. He said it like a fact, not a wish. Richard stood there, the storm doing its best impression of chaos behind him, and said nothing. Faces learn new languages slowly. The generator coughed itself awake at last, decided against it, and went back to sleep. The house stayed dark and candle-bright. The metronome swung as if it had eternal patience. Tick. Tick. Again. Henry asked. It sounded almost greedy. 2 counts, not 5, Lila said. We visit, we don't move in. They did it again. 2 clean beats, porch, yard, and back. On the 3rd try, Gate asked for more, and they negotiated a careful 3. Lila called the set and turned the metronome's pendulum to stillness. She didn't chase streaks. She collected them. 3 good things, she said out of habit. Henry didn't hesitate. 1, I met Pie and didn't fall on my face, he said, honest as always. 2, the thunder didn't boss me around. He swallowed. 3, I liked it. Caroline sat down hard, as if a chair had suddenly grown under her. You liked it, she repeated, tasting the sentence. Richard exhaled a sound that might have been a laugh in a different life. He came near the doorframe by the fridge and found the pencil marks Lila had made the day before, SIT and stand. He reached for the pencil sitting in the utensil jar, hesitated, and then drew a 3rd dash barely above the 2nd. Candlelight made his shadow tall and useless. He didn't label it because labels felt like claiming too much. He just stood there beside the marks as if they were lines on a map and he'd finally decided to join the trip. The power returned in a blare of apologies, the air system clearing its throat, a dozen small machines announcing their resurrection. The candles seemed suddenly old-fashioned and too bright. Lila pinched them out one by one. Smoke curled up like ribbon and disappeared. Tea. Arturo asked no one in particular, already setting water to boil as if tea were a rope you throw to people on a shaky dock. Tea, Caroline said. She wiped her cheeks without embarrassment. Henry leaned his head back and looked up at the kitchen ceiling, the same ceiling as yesterday, the same as forever, except different now. "Do you think the sky heard me?" he asked. "I think you heard you," Lila said. Richard slipped the useless phone into his pocket and looked at his son as if the glass between them had finally lifted. "I didn't know this was possible," he said, the sentence halting, the way a person tests new ice. "It was possible yesterday," Lila answered, not unkindly. "Today you saw it." He nodded, once. The nod contained a promise he didn't yet know how to make. When the cups landed on the table and the house decided to behave again, the kitchen kept its new secret: a boy who had stood in the dark and counted to 5, a woman who believed rhythm could be a bridge, a storm that had knocked the power out and switched something else on. The metronome, at rest, waited without hurry. Outside, the thunder rolled away, grumbling like a tired old dog. Inside, the beat stayed where it had always been, patient, simple, enough. Chapter 6, Practice for What? The storm left the world scrubbed and shy. In the morning the city looked closer, as if the rain had tugged it uphill by the hem. The Whitmore kitchen remembered candle smoke and new courage, pencil dashes by the fridge remembered too. Richard paused there, thumb on the third mark he'd drawn in the dark. He didn't label it this time either. He only looked, then checked his phone out of old habit and put it away out of a new one. Lila arrived with a roll of blue painter's tape and a plastic tray of ice cubes clinking like cheap jewelry. She set the metronome, wound it, and laid a clean strip of tape across the cream tile, a single sky blue line shoulder to shoulder with the kitchen island. "What's that?" Henry asked, wheels whispering as he rolled in. "A curb that forgot its manners," Lila said. "City sends us practice curbs now." He grinned. "We're practicing for curbs." "We're practicing to choose," she said, not missing the echo of Richard's question from the night before. "Curbs, cookies, doorways, ball games. Whatever's down the street." They started small. Seated, Henry reached each foot toward the tape and tapped, hello on the tick, back on the talk, learning to aim without kicking. Next, with Kane's and Lila's arm a guardrail, they tried the tiniest shift, weight to the left, flirt with lifting the right toe over the blue line, set it down with ceremony. The metronome's patient pendulum made the moment into music. "Tall, not brave," Lila cued. "Knees curious, heels honest." Henry's first 3 tries were all toe and no lift. On the 4th, the toe cleared by the width of a fingernail. He set it down with a gasp, as if he'd just posted a letter to a faraway friend. "Again," he said, because the word had started living in his mouth. Caroline watched from a chair, hands folded, not white-knuckled this time. She'd promised herself one new skill today: wait through the wobble. When Henry wobbled, she counted to 2 before rising. Most times he saved himself by 1. At break, Lila put 3 ice cubes on a dinner plate and slid it to the center of the table. "New game," she said. "Beat the ice. You stand and count to 6 before these melt to nothing. World's fastest glacier." "That's not how glaciers," Henry began, then saw the joke and smiled. "Okay. Pi at 6. Pi at 6, Lila agreed. He stood. 1, porch. 2, yard. 3, gate, which behaved today. 4, street, with a tremble. 5, alley, a new place he named on the fly because 5 needed its own stop. 6, pi, whispered like a spell. The ice sweated but held its shape. 7, he asked, greedy now, and Lila shook her head. Quit while the ice still thinks it's winning. She dabbed the plate with a towel and started them again, as if effort were a song with a second verse. Jenna, the Tuesday therapist, arrived midway and stopped at the blue line like it was a gallery rope. "What is this brilliance?" she asked. "Public Works project," Lila said. "Neighborhood improvement." Jenna knelt to Henry's level. "May I watch?" "You can watch if you clap on the beat," Henry said, and Jenna laughed and clapped on 2 and 4 like a person who'd learned rhythm at weddings. After the set, Jenna squeezed Henry's shoulder and looked at Lila with something like professional relief. "His trunk is talking," she said quietly. "It wasn't holding this long last week. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "Kitchen practice," Henry supplied, proud. Richard came in at the tail of that sentence, late to the party again. He nodded at Jenna, glanced at the tape, clocked the ice, frowned at the puddle. "We could buy a pediatric gait trainer," he said, half to himself. "A harness. Treadmill. They have a system in Boston." "We can," Lila said, even. "And maybe we will. But the curb to the fridge is free, and it's here 3 times a day." Richard looked at his son, not the tape. "What do you want to practice for, bud?" Henry thought the way kids do, fast, honest. "For getting to the porch when it rains," he said. "For stealing cookies. For standing in a line and not falling on a person." Richard huffed a laugh before he could stop it. "Okay," he said, softer. "Then, can I count?" Lila passed him the job without ceremony. "Say the places," she suggested, and he did, voice tentative at first, then steady: porch, yard, gate, street, alley, pie. The words sounded different in his mouth, less like goals, more like invitations. Not every round went clean. Midweek, Henry tipped too fast and slid to his knees. The sound startled everyone because it was the sound they'd all been dreading and rehearsing for. He made a face, more insult than pain, then swallowed it. Lila was there with a hand, not hauling, just offering. "Every boat rocks," she said, their old line. "We check for leaks and row again." Caroline waited her 2 counts, then came with a damp cloth and a cartoon bandage Arturo produced like a magic trick. Henry inspected the tiny bruise with the curiosity he saved for interesting bugs. "I'm naming it Texas," he declared. "Because it's big and it thinks it's important." "Welcome to the Union, Texas," Arturo said gravely, and everyone laughed hard enough to make the sting smaller. They added small extras each day: a breath cue on the rise, a shoulder roll between sets, 3 claps at the end to tell Henry's nervous system the work was over. Lila slid 2 rubber jar grippers under the cane tips so the tile felt kinder. She moved the blue line an inch farther one morning and didn't tell him. He discovered it on his own and looked betrayed, then pleased. On Friday, Caroline taped a flyer to the fridge: a neighborhood block party at the park down the hill, Sunday afternoon. Hot dogs, face paint, a high school band. "We could go for a little while," she said, testing the sentence like a bridge. Henry studied the clip art: a row of cartoon kids holding hands, a crooked treble clef. "Will there be curbs?" he asked, practical. "Grass," Arturo said. "Which is curbs pretending to be friendly." "Grass is rude," Henry declared, then glanced at the blue tape. "Maybe we practice rude." So they did. Lila laid a folded dish towel on the tile to mimic give. The first tap onto it felt like stepping on a lie, his ankle argued, then learned. "Slow feet," Lila said. "Fast eyes." By day's end he could lift a toe over the squishy line and set it down without the little panic his body used to send. That evening, Richard brought a small portable speaker and set it on the island like a peace offering. He cued a metronome app, then chose not to use it. He pressed play on Al Green instead. The kitchen filled with a beat softer than the wooden click, the kind that makes shoulders remember. Henry's fingers joined in, and then his feet, and then his breath. Practice for what? Richard asked again, but quieter this time, like a person reading the room. Henry didn't look up from his line, from his slow toe lift over painted sky. For Sunday, he said. For a hot dog. For whatever's down the street, Lila added, not as a correction but as a chorus. They closed the week with 3 pencil marks by the fridge, SIT, stand, and a tiny third one Henry insisted on labeling in blocky letters, hold, 7. Underneath, in Lila's tidy hand, beat the ice, 7 clean. Curb taps, 18. Falls, 1, Texas. Laughs, many. She didn't underline anything. The blue tape did that job just fine. On Sunday morning, the tape lifted without protest. It left no scar, only a memory. The kitchen felt wider. The curb would be waiting down the hill, and the grass would be rude, and the band would probably miss the beat sometimes. That was fine. Henry had learned something bands and boys have to learn. The rhythm is there whether or not anyone believes it, and you can practice believing. Chapter 7, Steps on the Grass. The block party made the park look borrowed from a postcard, pop-up tents like little sails, a bounce house breathing in and out, the smell of hot dogs melting into cut grass. The high school band warmed up on a splintery stage, their snare drum tapping a heartbeat that kept forgetting itself. Grass is rude, Henry reminded everyone as Richard lifted his chair out of the SUV. Rude but manageable, Lila said, tucking his canes under one arm. She wore her church shoes for luck and a bright scarf her daughter had mailed from Memphis. We practiced rude all week. They chose a spot near the edge of the lawn where the ground was flat-ish and the stage's shadow fell in a clean strip. Caroline unfolded a chair and did not sit. Richard stood with his hands in his pockets, the way men do when they want to fix the weather. Henry watched the band director count off, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the horns came in like a door opening. The beat wandered, but it was enough. He tapped his fingers on his chair arms, a quiet kitchen practice no one could see. Want a hot dog? Arturo asked, appearing with a grin and a paper tray like a magician pulling a dove. After, Henry said. The word surprised him. He looked at Lila. I want to try. Caroline's breath caught, she made herself let it go. Richard looked from the grass to the canes to his son, then back to the grass, as if it needed a warning. Lila set the canes in his hands and crouched so they were eye to eye. Same rules, she said. Tall, not brave. Knees curious. Heels honest. I'm here, not touching unless you ask. He nodded. The band's snare ticked a hiccup, recovered. Henry set his canes, rubber tips biting the turf without trusting it. He leaned the practiced lean, drew long through his spine, breathed like a person who remembered to, and pushed. The chair gave up his weight reluctantly, grass didn't offer the clean push of tile, but then he was up, a little hinge of boy and will. His calves trembled. The crowd, without knowing it, made a small tent of quiet around the attempt. 1, Lila said, low and steady. Porch, Henry answered, because names made place out of air. 2. Yard. 3. Gate, he whispered, and the word felt kind now, a door that knew him. The band slid into a marching tune, sloppy but cheerful. A gust lifted the corner of the hot dog tent. Henry wobbled, corrected. 4, Lila said. Street, he said, eyes on her face like a horizon. Now a little forward, she murmured. Just a little. He shifted his weight. His left foot, shy all spring, slid ahead an inch and found the grass. He set it down carefully, like placing a coin on a counter. It held. Someone near the lemonade stand stopped mid-pour. The band director's hands hovered, then kept time, smaller now, as if not to scare the moment. Again, Lila said. Henry brought the right foot forward to meet the left. It wasn't a step so much as a negotiation. He reached the end of Lila's shadow and paused, surprised by the shape of his own breath. 5, Lila said, not because of seconds now but because 5 meant pi and pi meant celebration. Pi, he said, grinning, and took a third little slide that made the distance between the chair and the grass into history. He sat when she told him to, a careful drop, canes clacking their tired thank you. He laughed the hiccup laugh that had started to belong to triumph. Caroline pressed both hands to her mouth and let the tears come without apology. Richard blinked hard once, then again, then gave up blinking and just let it happen. He looked smaller and happier than anyone had seen him in years. A few claps broke out and then turned into a tidy applause, not the kind that makes a person feel stared at but the kind a neighborhood gives a good idea. The band hit a wrong note together and turned it into a right one by sheer confidence. Again. Henry asked, greedy for it. One more pair, Lila said. We visit, we don't move in. He rose, slid left, slid right, 2 stubborn, honest steps, and sat, cheeks pink, eyes bright. Arturo handed over the hot dog like a medal. For services to the neighborhood, he said. Henry took a bite big enough to be a headline and chewed like a philosopher. He looked at the stage, at the grass, at his parents. I did it outside, he said, as if the sky were a witness that counted more than tile. You did, Caroline said, kneeling to kiss his hair. You did. Richard crouched, too, awkward in his nice jeans, and touched one cane like it might spook. What do we call that? He asked. Henry thought for a second. Steps on the grass, he said simply. Lila smiled. Good title, she said. They stayed for one more song and the face paint line. The grass kept being rude, the world kept being a little kinder. When they packed to go, the stage shadow had moved, as shadows do. Henry watched it slide over where he'd stood and did not feel smaller. He held his canes like quiet friends and said, to no one and everyone, same beat tomorrow. The park went back to being a park. The boy went back to being a boy. But the road home felt shorter, and the kitchen, waiting uphill, felt like it had grown a door that led to everywhere. Chapter 8, A New Beat. September arrived with the kind of light that makes everything look recently washed. The pencil marks by the fridge multiplied, SIT, stand, hold, 7, then a tidy ladder of dates and dashes that turned the doorframe into a private scoreboard. Some mornings Henry kissed his fingertips and tapped the newest line like a superstitious shortstop. Kitchen practice stayed. It didn't get grand, it got durable. Lila still wound the metronome and set the canes on their folded towel like sleeping instruments. They added small routes, the fridge run, 4 steps there, 3 back, the porch steal, to the threshold for weather reports, the cookie heist, exactly the distance of one parental sigh. Falls happened. Bruises bloomed and went through their proud colors. On cranky days, Henry glared at the metronome as if it had personally offended him. On better ones, he laughed and scolded it for being bossy. Tall, not brave, Lila would remind, and he would answer, knees curious, heels honest, like a creed. Richard changed in increments, the way houses settle after a storm. He still took calls, still wore suits that looked like plans, but more often he ended them in the kitchen doorway with the phone face down. Count me in, he'd say, and he meant the counting itself. He drew the day's marks, his handwriting cautious at first, then sure. When Henry swore softly after a slip, just once, perfectly used, Richard bit back a smile and said, "Language," so gently that the word landed like approval anyway. Caroline learned the art of hovering from farther away. She moved the thick socks to a prettier basket, then forgot to be ashamed of caring about baskets. She sang sometimes while the sauce simmered, tuneless, true, and did not shrink the sound when Henry noticed. At night she and Lila drank tea at the island and traded tiny victories like recipes. He made Allie without wobble. He asked for rest before I asked him to. Jenna, the therapist, started scheduling around kitchen practice instead of the other way. "His trunk is a different person," she said, delighted. "Tell the trunk it has my respect." One Wednesday, Henry made it from the table to the sink and back with stops at porch and pie. He arrived grinning, cheeks flushed, and announced, "I went to college." No one asked why, everyone knew what he meant, a far place, reached. The world outside the kitchen learned, too. At the clinic on Maple Avenue, a spare, beige room grew into something bigger. Richard and Caroline wrote a check that could have bought a building and did, the Brooks Community Therapy Room. The day the plaque went up, the clinic smelled like lemon cleaner and nervous pride. Lila wore her church shoes and the bright Memphis scarf. Henry wore a collared shirt that tried to behave. People clapped in that careful way adults clap around children they don't know. A reporter asked for a quote. Richard stared at the ceiling to keep his eyes from flooding. Caroline squeezed Lila's hand so hard they both laughed. Someone asked Lila to say a few words. She kept it short, because work waited. "Hope is a muscle," she said. "You don't stretch it by wishing, you work it by trying. Henry taught me that." And the kitchen helped. There were sandwiches after, and Henry stole a cookie on principle. On the way out, he paused at the plaque and traced his finger over Lila's name, then over his own, not there but somehow included. "It looks heavy," he said. "It is," Lila said. "Most worthy things are." Back home, the kitchen looked the same and not at all. The blue tape was gone but lived in everyone's head. The metronome's varnish had dulled where thumbs had wound it 100 times. The canes leaned like old friends. The doorframe's ladder of dashes caught the day's last light. They practiced. Some days the numbers budged, some days they didn't. On a Friday when nothing moved, Henry muttered, "Gates root again," and Lila answered, "So are we," and they stood one honest second longer than they had any right to. In late September, a breeze threaded the house like new music. Henry walked, slow, stitched steps, from the table to the sunroom, turned, and walked back. No one spoke. The metronome clicked like a soft applause. When he sat, he whispered, "Again," and they did, because that was the whole point, the beat beneath the story. The house on the hill kept its view. Rooms mostly behaved. The kitchen didn't, and no one wanted it to. If you stood in the doorway at dusk, you could hear it, tick, tick, step. A rhythm learned the hard way and kept the easy way, a new beat that belonged to all of them now, Caroline with her careful, saving hands, Richard with his pencil and patience, Henry with his stubborn, laughing will, and Lila, whose church shoes had walked a bridge into being and then stood aside so others could cross.